everybody. How's everybody doing today? This is a little bit different of a... My hat looks crooked. I gotta get that straight. I can see myself, and I don't know why it doesn't look straight. Man, it still looks crooked. There it goes. No, the other way. Hey, y'all, how's it going? This is a little bit different of a podcast. You know, from time to time, I do interviews. I'm always looking for something good to read. I am constantly searching Amazon and doing, clicking on books. I had bought so many that I was unhappy with that I joined Kindle Unlimited so that I could kind of test out books before I actually downloaded them. And it's a pretty good deal if you guys are readers. It's I've been buying books for years and years and years, and this is saving me money. But I come across books, and you know what pulls my attention to them is the book cover. Book covers are so important. And this man that I'm going to introduce you to here in a minute has got some cool book covers, but he backs it up with great stories. So I stumbled on a series of books, and we're going to talk about them in a minute, that are great. And he's a multi-talented author. He writes in several different genres. He writes Westerns and maritime stories and horror stories, and he does a good job with all of them. And I want to introduce you to him. His name is Jeff Crawford. He's got over 20 books published at the moment. And I guess that's all I could say right now. Let me bring Jeff in and say hi to Jeff. Everyone, this is Jeff Crawford. He's the author I was just telling you about. Jeff, how's everything going?
Oh, it's going great, Cam. How about yourself?
Oh, going good. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I read your Goliath series, and I thought, I've got to get in touch with this guy and at least tell him how much I enjoyed his books. And I finally found you on Facebook and sent you a message. And we weren't friends on Facebook, so I'm sure that message was kicked off in the... people you don't know. I don't know how that all works, but it's people you don't know, and I miss a lot of those. But he finally answered me back, and we got this dialogue going back and forth, and we finally talked on the phone, and we found out that I don't know how much we have in common, but we love reading and we love writing. And so we connected, and I invited him on, and I want to talk to Jeff from beginning to end about where he's from, the books he writes, where he gets inspired, and all those kind of things. So, Jeff, tell us who you are, where you're from. Give us a little background on what kind of good old boy you are.
Okay, this is going to be short because I'm a pretty boring guy. Born and raised in Western North Carolina. Started hunting and fishing with Daddy and Grandpa and all the uncles and cousins when I was about 5. Daddy had the opportunity to move to Florida, so we went to Florida, and that was country coming to town. I'm telling you. Yeah. I moved to a small town, but I only lived 3 blocks off of Main Street, so I'd never had neighbors on all 3 sides of me before, but that was kind of new and different because, I'd spent all my life digging up arrowheads, and now I was learning to play racquetball and ride skateboards. And but we moved into a part of Florida that was still horse and cow country, and a lot of cattle ranches, a lot of thoroughbred horses. And I got the bug bigger than I'd always had it, and started cowboying when I was 15. Started doing it full time when I was a senior in high school at 16. Graduated on Friday, started cowboying for a living when I was on the next Monday, and moved from there into thoroughbred horses, and ended up being a liaison between the local ranches and a Purina dealership because I understood the language of both. Did a couple of TV commercials, worked in a movie. Then we had the opportunity to come back to North Carolina because the grandparents were aging and both my parents wanted to be around the family. So we came back, and me and Daddy raised cows here for 30 years, and went to college, took a job in a ball bearing factory, moved up through the ranks there. They sent me to school, so I got my degree and learned to play golf, did a lot of hunting and fishing, read a lot of books from the time I was 4 years old until now, still read. And that was pretty much it. I just worked and played music, taught myself 6 or 8 different musical instruments.
Wow.
Watched a lot of college football and still do. Go Gators. And then had a surgery that was going to keep me down for about 3 weeks, and didn't know what I was going to do to keep from going stir crazy because there wasn't enough on TV to watch. Yeah. So I had a few notebooks laying around and 2 packs of Ticonderoga pencils and started writing a book. And that's how it all started.
Okay. Was that first book published?
No, that first book was garbage. and so was the next one. They're great for wrapping fish or for lining bird cages. So I wrote 8 that were just horrible. Yeah. And they were interesting stories, but written terribly.
Yeah.
And then something happened. Got to the 9th one and something clicked. And it was okay. It was pretty good. So I thought, and all of my test balloons thought. So I started reaching out to a couple of writers that I knew of, and wasn't getting anywhere with that. Nobody would tell me what I was supposed to do, you know, whatever. So I finally was given the name and number of a lady who was a best-selling writer, a best-selling editor, brilliant woman. And I was asking her advice, and she says, find you somebody that will read this book that you trust, but that doesn't love you. She said, because people that love you aren't going to be honest.
Right.
And I said, well, why don't you do it? And she said, no, I'm retired. My eyes hurt. She said, I'm give out. She said, I've got 4 books on my coffee table now I'm never going to read.
Yeah.
She said, I'm not going to do it. And I said, ma'am, I said, you've been gracious with your time. I'll sit here and listen to you complain all afternoon. Or you can just give me your address and I'll mail you a copy out tonight. And she said, sweetheart, me and you going to get along just fine. She said, you send it to me.
Wow.
So I did. And she called me back 2 weeks later on a Sunday night, about 8 o'clock. And I'll never forget this. She said, how honest do you want me to be? And I said, well, pretty honest, I guess.
Yeah.
And she said, you've got 6 misspelled words in this book.
Uh-oh.
I said, ooh, okay, you've read this book. And I said, what'd you think? And she said, for the last 25 or 30 years, 6 or 8 people a year have tried to write this exact same story. Exactly. Okay. She said, you're the first person that ever got it right.
Oh, wow.
She said, I've never read a more perfect novel by a first-time author than I did this. She said, don't change a single word. And I said, okay, what do I do next? She said, I don't know. She said, publishers aren't going to touch you because they don't know you. It's a short book, and it is extremely unsettling because of the nature of the book.
Right.
She said, but put it out as an ebook and see what happens. So it won't cost you anything. So I had a cover worked up, and we put it out and actually sold a few copies. And I decided to write another one because it was fun writing books.
Yeah. And
the next one got longer and got better and longer and better. So by the end of it all, I had published 11 as an independent. And that's how the whole writing thing got started. And I think it was probably 6 books in before I got comfortable with the voice that I had found.
Yeah.
It took a while to find that, to where I could sit down and say, okay, I know how to do this. Until then, I was groping and searching.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you, so how many do you have published to date?
The 23rd one went to the publishers this weekend.
Wow.
It'll come out pretty soon. In fact, I'll have 3 releases this month. I had 2 older books that my publishing company picked up and is going to re-release, and then a brand new one that I just finished. And I'm working on the edits for 2 books right now, and then I start a brand new one in about 2.5 weeks.
Fantastic. Now I'll tell the people who watch my podcast, I'm on my 4th book, authored by Jeff Crawford. The first was a series it's the series I stumbled on, and they're short. Would you consider those novellas in a series?
You know, I would have considered them too short for a novel, but my publishing company likes that length, and it's what they consider a novel or a good book. I personally, if I was sitting down, just me, I don't like to do a book less than 80,000 words, just because I'm really long-winded when it comes to writing.
Right.
But the idea behind that is, if you're writing a series, you can write them faster so the customer doesn't have to wait 6 months, 8 months, a year to get the second in the series. So they wanted a book out every 8 weeks by an author, which scared the daylights out of me when I first heard that. And then I found out, okay, I can turn 40,000 words or 45,000 words sometimes in 28 days, sometimes in 35 days. And I can do that. And it took a little bit of getting used to.
That's amazing to me, because the series that we're talking about, and Jeff's author page will be linked in the description below, his Amazon author page. And you can go there and find all these books we're about to talk about. But this is the Goliath series. Is that what you call it, the Goliath series? It is a maritime story about a whaling ship that encounters a sea monster. That's all I'm going to say. But it's amazing to me how in that short span of time you can actually get your thoughts organized and your prose organized and get your story formatted in a way that it comes across so well. They read like books that you've worked on for 6 months. I mean, just the first 40,000 word. And I will say this, I noticed on the reviews, and it's the only one of yours I've read the reviews on, but there were I think there's 70 or 80 reviews on that first book. Where's the next one? Everybody wants to know, where's the next one? Where's the next one? And when I saw those, I don't usually read reviews. I'll read the first couple of chapters of a book, and if it holds my interest, I'll never forget Margaret Atwood. I saw an interview with her, and she says, if you want to be a writer, hold my attention. Hold my attention. That was her advice to novice writers. And this book holds your attention, but you have to get 15 or 20 pages into it, but it starts to grab you in. And the vocabulary between these characters and the dialogue and the way you crafted the story is so good. It's amazing to me you crank those out one a month. It's amazing.
That the vocabulary was the thing that drew me to writing those 3 books. I like whaling stories. And I like Greek mythology, so I was going to put those two together. But to be able to talk the way that they spoke almost 200 years ago was so foreign to what I've always grown up with here in Western North Carolina or in Central Florida. And it was a really neat experiment for me that I think worked. Well, I know it did. And I say that when I was asked to do these books, which you mentioned the reviews, a lot of them said the book didn't end. Well, no, it didn't. Wasn't supposed to. You're supposed to read number 2,
right?
Number 3. And that's where the ending. But when I was asked to do it, I if you'd have held my feet to the fire, I'd have said, these books sell 10 copies, maybe. And 5 of those will be to people that know me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and they're not going to do anything except stick them under a table that's got one leg too short.
Yeah.
And they've outdone anything I've ever done to this point. For some reason, that creature stuff really resonates with people.
It's the book covers. It's the story grabs you in the first couple of chapters, and you and I've noticed this in the second series that I'm reading is I need to, like I told you this morning, I was up at 4:30. I was sitting on my porch drinking coffee, reading your Gun Hands series. I just bought those, and I mean, it's like I'll think about it all day. I can't wait to get back to my Kindle and find out what's next, because you know something very interesting is going to be next. It's like Jeff is able to move the story. And when it slows down, I've noticed that you begin to dig in and get to know who these characters are and the protagonist in the book. And you begin to kind of be really acquainted with them, and you can almost see them in your mind. And that, we were talking about this earlier, that is the trait to me of a great author, who can set you in the mood and take you to that place, and you're not even really mentally where you're sitting. It's a great talent. And that's why I really wanted to talk to you, because we have a lot of readers in our audience, and guys, I think you will love this book. So do you want to go through this series that you've written and kind of just give us a short synopsis of?
We can.
I mean, is that kind of boring, or is that okay?
No. I'll sit and talk about Martin guitars and Browning shotguns and Uncle Henry knives and Florida football and my writing, as long as somebody will sit there.
All right, let's do it, man.
With the Gun Hand series, to me, it's maybe not the perfect. It's a good example of an anti-hero. The guy that you're following in this book, Walsh Ritter, is a bad guy. Yeah. There's no getting around it. This is a bad guy. He does terrible things for money. But he's the one you pull for, because he finds his own ox in a ditch for the first time. And it's in a big ditch. He's never encountered anybody as crazy, who thinks he's as sane as the person who's got him held up.
Yeah.
And it's in the most unlikely of places. When Walsh finds himself all but dead and wishing he was, a defrocked monk, if that's the correct, a disowned monk, let's put it that way.
Maybe excommunicated or... Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excommunicated, kicked out, go away, don't come back. Finds him. And Walsh, for the first time, thinks, okay, this guy's going to take care of me. I'm going to be all right. And boy, howdy, was he wrong. This man was kicked out of the order because of his heretical thinking. And he decides that over the years that all he needed was somebody to practice on to see if his theory was right.
I don't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's like, here's an example. I'm halfway through the first book in this series, and I keep thinking to myself, I want to know what he did that made them kick him out. I know they called him a heretic, and I know these guys who live these monastic lives are, they're very rigid and all, but I just want to know. But as time goes on, you get a little more. Like, for instance, he's putting Walsh through a lot of stuff for really nothing. But in his mind, it has a great purpose that he's dreamed up in his mind. But on occasion, he'll go back and say, well, I know this is making him uncomfortable, but it's not me that's doing it. It's like the cause. It's it's like fate has all come down to this one guy. So anyway, I just have to tell you everything I pick up from these books.
Well, it's all in the interest of becoming more and better. You go hear that phrase a few times in that book. And, Lord, I'd love to tell you why he's doing this, but I'm not going to, because that gives too much away.
Right.
But he believes that what he's doing is the best possible thing he can do for mankind to create a better world. And Walsh is step one.
Right.
And Walsh is going to become his shining star, his example, his disciple. And they're going to spread this.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, poor old Walsh is just about to lose his mind.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that I don't know that I've ever read about anybody being so physically tortured as this poor guy is.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
It is. And I won't say anything about this except this. The food services are not wonderful where this guy is at.
You guys won't believe. You just won't believe what this crazy guy is doing. Well, let's talk about this. Okay, so the horror genre is not that's not what did you ever dream you would write a horror series?
No, I like to write scary suspense.
Okay. I
like to make people flinch and draw up. But to write a straight out horror, no. This is funny in a way. I was in Florida finalizing the publishing deal on my 11th book. Everything had been done in Wyoming for the audio part of it. I had finished all of the edits, and I was meeting with the publisher with a conference call with my narrator, who's a wonderful writer. By the way, if you're looking for somebody new to get into, Pamela Fagan Hutchins, can't go wrong. But she also narrates on occasion.
Okay.
And I talked her into narrating a book of mine called Sundown on the Savannah River. And I was down there doing all this. And the day before I was supposed to meet with everybody, I was looking forward to it because after the meeting, I got to take a break. I didn't have to write. I didn't have to do anything. I could sit in the Florida sun for a couple of days and then come back and just goof off.
Yeah.
And I get a message from a guy at a publishing house. I'd heard of him, but I didn't know the publishers. And he says, "Can you write a horror?" I don't know. I've never set out to just try to do one.
Yeah.
And he said, "Why don't you give it a whack and see what you can do?" So I started writing The Darkest Sins. Right then. I didn't even have a computer with me. I didn't have a computer. Totally. I had written the last book on my iPad. The last two books on my iPad. The previous three I had written on my iPhone. And before that, I did everything in longhand. I didn't even own a computer. and this guy was wanting me to turn over a book. So I sat down that night and I started writing, wrote the first chapter. I said, okay, maybe I can get into it this way. And went to the meeting the next morning, did everything I was supposed to do, took a couple pictures, walked out, and wrote the second chapter. Left for home the next day and dictated into my phone chapter 3. Got home that night, copied it, put it into Word, and took off writing. And that was the first 2 days of June. And August the 7th, I gave them the book. And this is when I thought it was neat. They sent me an email that said, we got your manuscript. We'll get back with you in 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. 6 days later, I got an email that said, when would you have time to meet with us? And I said, okay, that's not a rejection.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there they can use if I tweak it. And I met with them the next day on a Zoom meeting, and hey, how you doing? Where are you from? And the editor, my chief editor then stopped me and said, we'll get back to all this. She said, I held up the book and she said, we've read it. She said, I've read it twice. She said, we don't want this book. She said, we want 3 exactly like it.
Oh my goodness.
I had never published with a publisher before, really. Yeah. One book. And that did not go well. But to get a book deal was a big thing.
Sure.
To get a 3-book deal was a really big thing. So we talked and I agreed to it. And I got almost started good on book 3 when they called me and said, we want 3 more in the series. So I hadn't even finished the first 3. And
so they wanted 6 in total.
They wanted 6. So, okay. So I got almost through book 4. And they called me up and they said, we want you to write a collaborative novel with a guy. We think you would be a great partner. I said, okay. So I started writing that book while I was writing the Gun Hand series. I would write 1,800 words a day on each one, which I don't advise.
Right. It's hard to stay in the zone that way.
Yeah, it is. It's like pushing a chain.
Yeah.
But I did that, and we got them the collaborative book. I finished book 4, got started on book 5. And the same guy that called me in Florida when I was there in June called me up and he says, can you write a creature book? I said, what the hell's a creature book? He said, it's a book about a creature that jumps out of the woods or jumps out of the attic or out of the ocean, grabs you and scares you. I don't know. He said, well, do it. And I said, well, I'm writing. He said, try this anyway.
Yeah.
So I put Walsh aside and started writing this Goliath thing. And I wrote, and they loved it, and they wanted, quick, get us another one. So I wrote, and I gave them 3 books and went back to Walsh. And they sent me a contract for the 3. So in a matter of 5.5 months, I had been signed to do 10 books. And I'd only written 11 total before then. So I was flipping out. Didn't think I could be any busier. Didn't think I could have anything else to do with writing than I was already doing. And that's when the Authors on the Air people came to me, and that's what led to the podcast. So I'm writing and talking to writers and thinking about writing and abandoning sleep completely forever.
Yeah.
And that's what and somehow managed to squeeze in 3 or 4 college softball games a year. But that got us up to where I'm at now.
And you're starting a new one in a couple of weeks. You're just taking a break, or are you paying attention to the podcast? What's going on?
I'm doing the podcast. I'm editing two older books that the publishing company's parent company picked up. They do Westerns, and
I noticed you've got some of those in your library. You've got, okay.
Yeah, I'm not the best Western writer. I don't guess. I think that's probably Robert D. Parker, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Louis L'Amour, Frank Zane, and all that. Those are all good. Larry McMurtry.
Yeah.
You know, but I have a real knack for writing Westerns because I lived the cowboy life. I don't have to rely on cliches and stuff that's already been done.
Yeah.
I can be original and be correct. So the publishing company saw an old book of mine and they said, "Where is this? What is this?" And I said, "It's an independent." And they said, "We've read the first chapter." Said, "Could we have it?" And I said, "Sure." So I took it down from Amazon, gave it to them, and they sent me a contract. They said, "We're going to send you one." I said, "For what, for this one book?" And they said, "No, for 3. We want the series of this Gabriel Ransom."
Right.
I said, "I don't know how to do a series. It didn't end to where I can."
Right.
It was done.
Just a standalone book, right?
They said, "Write standalones with the same character. It doesn't have to be a continuation." And I never had thought about it like that. And I said, "Well, I can do that." So I just finished that this weekend and sent it to them. Waiting on cover art this week. And in the meantime, I had 2 Westerns that I had written 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Wow.
And we're going to take those down from the independent status, and they're picking those up. And when I get the editing done on that, get them tweaked the way I want them, because how I look at a book now is not the same as I looked at one 5 years ago. So they'll get those books in a couple of weeks, and then I start a brand new one of one that I wrote originally, 2010, that ended up as drawer. But now I know how to write that book. And I always thought it was a great story, so I'm going to rewrite the entire novel. So it's crazy busy.
Do you ever feel like you've do you ever feel like you're overloading your own wagon?
Shoot, yeah.
To where it limits your creativity? I mean,
sometimes there's so much going on that it's hard to get the machine to turn on.
Yeah.
But once I do, then it works.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's sometimes you have got way too much hay on the wagon.
Yeah.
But given the choice of having too much to do, or wondering out there if anybody in the world is reading your book or wants it,
yeah,
I'll take the too busy.
Yeah, me too. I know that, and we've talked about, Jeff's even listened to one of my Steve Lilly things, and I write all those, and he was very complimentary about that. And he was like, I can get into those characters. And I was like, oh man, it's a writer actually telling me like my story. But what I find is when, and I have a 10-hour a day job, and I do all this podcasting stuff. I just started it as a hobby. But when I sit down to write and everything's quiet and I can actually sit down and think about the story I want to tell, man, it just kind of all comes up and I can just go and go and go and go and go. Do you ever get in those modes where it's like, okay, now now I know what's going to happen. And you just take it there, and then you get to that point, and before you even get to that point, you already know where you're going to go next, and it just keeps going and going and going. And then when you reread it, you can rearrange. And I just love the process, and
that's the fun part. That really is. It also is to me, it's the most important part to learn from. You can have a wide range of vocabulary. You can be well read. You can know how to create imagery and describe a setting. And all of those things are hugely important. I mean, they're just huge. But nothing, in my opinion, is more important to a writer than developing patience.
Yeah.
And knowing that what's going to happen to Walsh Ritter 9 pages from now gets you so excited you could lick yourself all over.
I know.
But you have to get there.
Yeah.
You have to get there. And it may take 2 days to get there.
Slow down and get there, right? Is that what?
Don't rush it up to get to that, or it'll be junk.
Yeah.
And that's where you learn to develop thought processes.
Yeah.
There's times when absolutely nothing will happen to Walsh in a book for an entire chapter, 3-4 pages, 5 pages. But the whole time he's thinking, and you're hearing what he's thinking. And to me, that's as important as anything else in the book.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely am. And I'm at the point in this, Walsh Ritter series. It's, tell the audience what you call it, the Gun Hand series.
The Gun Hand series.
I'll be putting, book covers up if I can get them from Jeff, and if not, I'll take screenshots from Amazon. But you'll see what the book covers look like. So when you guys go to buy them, you'll know what to look for. But I find
they're hard to miss.
Yeah, the book covers are so. What a unique idea on those book covers. Whoever came up with that idea, it's unique and it's different, and that's kind of what drew me to look at those. And that's what you want with a cover. Absolutely want with a cover. There are a lot of authors that they have good work out there and they're self-published, and they just put out these shitty book covers. It looks like a third grader did them, and it makes people think it's going to read like a third grader wrote it. In my opinion, I'm not being critical, and I'm not a published author, but from a business sense, if you want to sell books, you have got to do something with those covers. I mean,
oh yeah,
and spend a little bit of money on the cover and get it out there. But, yeah, I'm reading these, and I haven't, and I know this sounds corny, but I haven't been excited about a book in a year, or a series of books. I read a lot of standalone stuff. I told you the other day, I like Cormac McCarthy and Charles Frazier and people like that. I love the really, really good authors. And there's also some lesser known authors that I follow, but I'm so excited because I'm only halfway through this first book. That means I've got 5.5 more to go in this series, So that's the kind of, I don't know that. Well, I'm getting a little dreamy here, but I just love to read good stories, and that's a great feeling for a short period of time to know that you have some really fun reading material to get into. And then when I get done with those, I'll read a serious nonfiction book, and I kind of switch back and forth. But what a great break from something serious. These the Gun Hand books are just so good. And Goliath, I loved it too.
Well, thank you. I thank you very much. I tell you what I believe, and there's no way to prove this, but I was so excited about getting to sit down and work on these books because they're hugely different from anything I'd ever done.
Yeah.
I believe that translates or bleeds into the book to the reader if I'm enjoying writing them.
Yeah.
I think the reader's going to stand a better chance of enjoying reading them.
No doubt. No doubt.
I believe there's a ton of emotions go into writing a book that the reader picks up on.
Yeah.
If I'm not digging it, if it's boring, or if I'm just putting down words, you're not going to like the book. And I know that.
I kind of got into this dino fiction for some reason. I picked up a book. It was a couple of years ago, and it was a dinosaur time travel type sci-fi kind of book and I enjoyed it. And so I got, well, maybe I'll get that experience from, I think our connection dropped. Our connection, can you hear me?
There you go. We're back.
I think my connection dropped or something, but yeah, we're still recording. And so I didn't know how to find those. Usually you'll get recommendations under that are similar to, what you've read. And I picked up a couple of other ones, and it's like, I don't want to read 5 chapters of a man and his daughter discussing their history and her marriage. And, I want to read a story. Keep it moving. Like Margaret Atwood said, hold my attention. That's what readers who read fiction want, in my opinion. And these stories are so fun because I'll tell the audience, they're different than, now I haven't read a true Western written by Jeff, but I can imagine that if it's with his horror genre books, the gun hand books, they're different. They're just different, but they're written in a way you can follow the story, and it's just a really, really great fun read. And so the true Westerns that you're writing, give us a little synopsis on those, if you can. I understand they're standalone, but is this guy a bad guy? Is he a good guy, or is he
He's another anti-hero.
Okay.
But this one has more of a conscience, and there's certain things that he won't abide. And he has really crazy lines that he draws in his mind that he will not cross. Things that you'd think were silly to somebody like him, but he's very, very devout about what he'll do and what he won't do.
Right.
And he's sort of even though he's a bad guy, he's the one that's going to come in and get the girl off of the railroad tracks.
Right.
Yeah. He's, I'll put it this way. He should wear a gray hat, because he's not a white and he's not a black hat.
Yeah.
He's riding that line in between. And when he's a good guy, there's nobody better.
Right.
And when he's a bad guy, there is nobody you want less looking for you. He is a bad guy. So it's been a lot of fun writing these 3 books, because you get to walk both sides of the line. Yeah. And that's what makes it sort of fun. And it was sort of that way with the Gun Hand series. I'll say this about that, and I don't want to give anything away to the one person out there that might be thinking about buying these books. Walsh Ritter in the Gun Hand series is basically a defensive character. You don't see him doing many things unless he has to. All he wants to do is get away. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Now, when he does get backed up against the wall, he'll do pretty rough stuff.
Yeah.
But it's never of his own doing. He's forced into it.
Right.
But later on in the series, book 5, book 6, he's had enough. And you get to see what he's really made of. And it is scary. I mean, it's bad what this guy can do. And that made it a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Because
you get to really flip the switch and say, okay, get back and just let him go. And so it was and there's stuff in there that's going to be politically incorrect, and I'm going to get mail over it. A little bit, I think, but it suits the book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would hope that fiction can remain out of the woke, how we're supposed to think or talk kind of thing. Fiction should be the Wild West. I'm using that in a general term, but it kind of like the internet used to be the Wild West. The internet, Facebook, social media used to be fun. It's not any fun anymore, If they take that out of fiction, I mean, that's when I know we're in Soviet Russia. I mean, it's like fiction is so much fun. But I was going to say, Walsh Ritter has a line he won't cross. That's what got him in the whole situation.
Oh, yeah.
And I was so glad he did it. I was like, way to go, Walsh. All right, man.
And the bad thing is it came back to bite him.
Yeah, it did. Oh, man. man. Okay, what else is going on? What else are... tell us about your podcast. The podcast is called... I've watched a couple of them, and The Plot Thickens. Tell us about your
Plot
podcast.
Thickens.
Yeah.
I had Authors on the Air Global Network is a huge deal for writers. They have about 50 or 60 different types of shows on their network that deal with specific types of subjects, whether it's horror or fantasy or whatever, sci-fi. And over the years, I was really, really lucky to get my nose in under the tent and get to be on the show that the executive director did. She was a great interviewer, still is. And I did her show 3 or 4 times. And then one day I get a message from her that says, we're doing a thing called In Conversation, where one writer talks to another writer, because the questions are going to be different. The whole thing's going to be different than a host talking to a writer. Would you be interested in doing that? Yeah, I would. That'd be fun. So she says, who would you like to talk to? And I said, I'd like to talk to Revis Wortham down in Texas. Great writer. And he and I had a similar growing up. We understood hunting and fishing and farming and all that. So we got on there and did the show, and I had a list of questions that long that I truly wanted answers to, because he's here and I'm and so it's supposed to be a 20-minute conversation, and at 45 minutes I was on question 5 out of 100 or whatever.
Yeah.
And she broke in, and we had to wrap things up. After a while we talked another 10 minutes, and I had the best time. It was just wonderful. Well, the network people kept kicking it around. And back then they did everything live, and live listeners was a number that they were confident in. And then the conversation that Rev and I had went way above that. I mean, way above that. And they tried for a long time to figure out why. And they decided that it was that I had something they thought might be interesting. So they offered me a show. And I said, doing what? And they said, we want you to talk to writers about writing suspense.
Okay.
And dark and edgy. Okay. And they said, let us know and we'll go get whoever you want to get. All right. So I did all the prep work, got set up. And they said, who you want to talk to first? And I said, Rev Wortham. I said, he's the one that started all this. I want to bring him on first. So she said, well, call him and see what he says. So I called him and he said, you tell me when, I'll be there.
Wow.
So that just sort of deepened a really great friendship that I have with him. And it went from there to Greg Stumbo, a great light horror comedic writer. You're not going to get as scared, but you're going to have a lot of laughs. It's a really different kind of thing to write. And I actually wrote a collaborative book with him. And then there was April Rain out of California, terrific writer. Jonathan Mayberry, bestseller all over the place.
Yeah.
David Bell, Pam Hutchins, Harrison and Matt Query. I'm actually talking to a guy today, Ed Rosick, and coming up on the show is Richard Chismar, Stephen King's writing partner.
Wow.
So not only do I get to provide a interesting conversation to listeners, and I can say that with a little bit of authority, because out of the network, after 7 shows, mine had tied for number 3 in popularity. So I know that there's people out there digging what we're doing.
Right.
More because of the writers than me, but whatever. But I'm also learning from these writers. With every question I ask, I get a good answer to something I wanted to know.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's making me, I hope, a better writer. And I hope with each show it makes me a better conversationalist.
Yeah.
I don't know that, but I hope it is.
Yeah.
So that's my life. Saturdays I watch football. The rest of the time I write and I work on podcasts.
Yeah. Where is the podcast available?
You can look for it on Authors on the Air Global Network, and you can type in my name in the search button, and it'll give you all of those. Or you can go to Facebook and type in "And the Plot Thickens," and it'll go straight to that page. Or you can look for them on YouTube on, what is it, Soundgarden?
Yeah.
Or there's a couple other platforms. I'm really not up on those. My producer does those. I'm not a technical guy.
It's probably out on the podcast network, like Spotify, yeah. Apple, Google, Podcasts.
Spotify, that's the word. That's the thing I was looking for. Yeah. But like I said, I use YouTube to find them the most, to share them and pass those along. But it's really interesting, and I'm not saying that because I'm in it. I'm saying that because of the people that are nice enough to come on the show, and I get to sit with them for 18, 20 minutes and just talk a very narrow subject.
Yeah.
How do you make people tense? How do you make them on edge?
Yeah.
How do you make them sit with the covers pulled up to their chin and the lights on?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily scary, but it's suspense. It's building, the tension until you want to do something already or scream. It's that kind of a thing. And whether it's talking to Nolan Nash, who's from New Orleans, and everything is creepy in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Or I'll get in trouble for that. I take that back. I love New Orleans. Or Maureen Kilmer, who writes very light and funny horror and suspense. It's just fun to talk to these people.
Yeah.
And, the same way I'm hoping it's been fun for you.
Absolutely. And I've tried to keep my mouth shut, but
well, don't.
Well, I love talking because I can, even though I'm not asking you specific questions, I'm getting answers and learning things just listening to you talk. And so, ideas I have in my head about stories that I really feel compelled to write or that I want to get done. I may not be learning exactly what I need to know, but I'm learning some questions to ask, if that makes sense. Like, I've never thought about asking an author, how do you build suspense in a scene? How do you bring them? When is it too long? When are you doing it? One thing I appreciate that I've learned from, one thing you can do to learn a lot about writing is to read a lot. Read how writers set their stories up and read how they set scenes up and chapters up. One thing I like about what you do is, like, for instance, in the Goliath series, you don't spend a huge amount of time on, like, for instance, the attack. All the violence going on. You'll spend a couple of paragraphs on that, then you move on. And we all know what's happening, but the story continues, and what happens after, I find, and I remember when I read the first attack, and I hope I'm not I don't think I'm giving too much away, but I thought, that's amazing that I got all that out of 2 or 3 paragraphs. I can see what's happening to this ship. I can see what's happening to the crew. I can feel the intensity of the crew. I was afraid for them. I'm thinking, where do I jump? How do I jump away from the monster? How do I, all this kind of stuff. And guys, I'm not giving a lot away because a lot of stuff happens in the Goliath series, but I would think you would assume that there's a monster attack, and since it is about a sea monster, but yeah. So I like. Yes, this has been very fascinating to me, and I have to really pull back the reins on myself to not just bug the shit out of people. And it's like D.A. Roberts and I are good friends. I've narrated two of his books. I'm working on the third one, and and I've told you this, I'm not in any way able to bring these stories alive like I should. I think I'm better at just the short versions, but I think the sun's coming through, it's kind of blinding me. But your books need a really good narrator. I mean, they're such good stories, but I pick DA's brain a lot. I'm like, how did you get from here to here and do this? He writes these military style monster hunter type books that I think they're pretty interesting. I mean, they're full of action, and they're more, they don't get into the depth of the characters. They kind of stay on the surface, and it's parts moving around the game board type books, almost. He told me that somebody had mentioned to him he's the Tom Clancy of cryptid hunters, and so
that's
I thought,
a good compliment.
It's like a technical book. Even in Tom Clancy's books, I never really got to know Jack Ryan that well. I just knew all of his accomplishments and what he was willing to do to protect the secrets and the integrity of the security of the country. But you never really fall in love with Jack Ryan in Tom Clancy's earlier books, and now they've got people writing in his name now, and it's the Jack Ryan series have just gone haywire and crazy. They're good, but like Walsh Ritter, I like Walsh Ritter. I like the guy, even though I know some bad guys in my life, and I like them. I mean, they're bad guys. They're bad guys. You're kind of buddies with them. You know where to keep your distance as far as your responsibility in some of the things they do. But you like them because you kind of know them. You know who they are and where they came from, and so I like Walsh Ritter. I hate his antagonist. I hate that guy because he's so rigid in his. He is so rigid in his beliefs and his, what is it? This made up world that he's, and so you figure all these things out and you get to know the characters. I love those kind of books. Those are the kind of things I love to read. So,
well, I'm not going to say too much, but there's going to be a third guy show up.
Yeah.
And you're going to hate him worse in that book.
There's more to hate in the Gunhead series.
Just when you think you've hated all you can, no, there's more. I'll say this, getting back to what you mentioned earlier about, asking somebody about how to write suspense and what does what and what does this. Every writer I have on my show is different, so I approach it different. But the one question I ask every single writer that comes on is, what is scarier for the reader? The fear of the known or the fear of the unknown? And that's where you can start your book. Okay, is this going to be about something they know, or is this going to be about something that nobody knows about?
Right.
And once you decide what that is, you can make it just as suspenseful or scary as you want. You can't do that in the middle of a book. You got to know that going in. And that's as much as I ever know, because I don't outline. What happens on my computer screen today is going to be a bigger surprise to me now as it is to you in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it makes it fresh and fun to write that way.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. It's like this Steve Lilly series that I've written for a podcast, and I'm about to launch its own podcast. But those stories are short events. They're comical. They're violent. Because the characters are guys I've known. I'm in the structural steel business, and so these characters are guys I've known, from my teenage years all the way to now. And there's just a bunch of crazy guys down here in the Mid-South, and especially when you get into the iron workers that are erecting it, and the shop hands that are putting it together, and everybody in between. And then just some crazy characters you might meet in a beer joint or get to know at a local pub, or you kind of put all those guys together. But I write these stories so that they're kind of standalone, and that's why I called them journal entries. However, the novel that I'm putting together is a lot deeper, and you get to know who these guys are, especially Steve Lilly, and where he came from and the violence that he came up through. And it's I'm really wanting to go deep so that when the reader gets a quarter of the way into the book, they're going, okay, now I kind of see why he is the way he is now. And he's got a whole history that's pretty crazy. And I think a lot of the people that listen to those stories think he's just this, kind of crazy redneck who's kind of stumbled on this Bigfoot hunting gig, and he's making money. But there's a purpose, and there's not a purpose, but there's a chain of events that bring him there. And when he's faced with it, he excels at it because of everything in his past. And so it should be fun. And I'm starting this week. I'm starting to actually sit down. I've got notes, and I've got chapters, and I'm up to this chapter, and I've got some of the stuff 3/4 of the way through figured out in notes, and I don't know what the end is going to look like, but I've got the story kind of laid out in my head, and I've got just tons of files on the computer and research and things like that. And so all that to say, it is so much fun putting these things together and trying to get them to gel in a story that, I agree with you, it is so much fun to do,
Oh yeah.
And so
well, I'll go ahead and make it public right now that I want the first autographed copy that goes out.
Okay, well, let's see. I think I could do it pretty quick without distractions, and I may have to learn what you do. I may have to learn to, oh my God, writing 2 books at one time. I don't know how in the world I would do that. I don't know. And I know the co-authored book is a collaboration, but still, you've got to think that would put so much pressure on me to try to be as good a writer as who your counterpart is. Did you feel any of that?
Shoot, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know him from Adam when we started. They said, would you mind doing this? And I said, yeah, I'll take a crack at it. So they set up a meeting. And when I met with the editor, and he was on the other third of the screen, it was the first time I'd ever seen him. Never heard of him, nothing. And we kicked around an idea for 2 minutes, maybe. And we got off, exchanged emails, and said, okay, we'll see how this goes. Well, next morning I got up and chapter 1 was done and waiting on me. All right. So I said, all right, I'm going to see what this guy's got. Because I knew what I was reading. I said, I'm going to put him back on his heels. And we had agreed to do a Jekyll and Hyde day and night type thing. And he took the day side. He took the fun side, the good side, and left me with the dark. And I tend to write creepy easier than I do unicorns and sunshine. Yeah. So I wrote, and he wrote 2 chapters, and I wrote 1, and he calls me about a week into it. And I said, hello. He said, what the hell? I said, what are you talking about? He said, man, I ain't never been as scared in my life as I was reading that chapter.
Awesome.
He said, I didn't think you could do that. He said, I didn't know how to do that. I said, well, he said, where's that come from? I said, late night Chinese food. I said, it will mess with your mind. So, and we wrote that entire book in, seemed like it was 2 weeks and a day.
Really?
Yeah.
I've seen it on your author page, and I think I saw your name with another author, so that gives me another one to look forward to. So what do you guys do? You say, okay, you write one, I'll write one. You write a chapter, I'll write a chapter. Is that how that goes?
Mm-hmm. And what was neat was he was writing this poor guy that you want to feel so sorry for, because he's everything in the world that could kick him has.
Yeah.
And I'll say this: it's about parasomnia, where you're paranoid and you can't sleep at the same time. Well, he just thinks he's sleepwalking, and he's never rested. He's always tired. He can't understand where he goes at night or what he does because he can't remember it. But he wakes up and his feet are dirty, he's bloody, he's bruised, and he doesn't know why. And the nighttime guy is so out of his mind that he didn't even know the daytime guy exists.
Yeah.
So you have two completely different people doing two completely different things and don't know about each other. And they're in the same body.
What a great idea for a story.
And it gets, the longer he let me go, the twitchier it got. And then came the one where I scared the hell out of him. And then I said, all right, now I'm going to turn it loose. He said, you haven't already? I said, no, I've been reining back. He said, well, let it go, boys. And I did. And he didn't talk to me for about a day and a half. It really bothered him what I did.
Oh, man. That's hysterical. What that prompts me, I wasn't going to say this, but I'm halfway through. I hope to finish book 1 tonight, but how many words is that? That first book's in the gun has 60?
About 85, 86,000.
Oh, it is? Okay. Wow. Man, and what I find with the Gun Hand series is I'm flying through the pages, but I'm reading every word. I'm not, a lot of times you can skim through some stuff, but what I was going to say is, I was reading some of this stuff this guy's doing to Ritter, and I'm like, all right, I've talked to this guy on the phone. Where is he getting this stuff? How is he coming up with this stuff? But it's just, to write horror fiction or even, really horror or, some of these detective type books. My wife loves those. She reads one right after another. She loves a lot of them are from writers in the UK. She likes their style of writing. And, but they're just things we think. I mean, and again, I go back to Margaret Atwood, and I've never read anything she wrote that I liked. I have to, but she has great advice for writers, and she says, a lot of the things that happen in some of her stories, namely The Handmaid's Tale, and I've never read it. I've watched some of the TV series. It's pretty good TV series. But she says, I didn't think any of this stuff up, the evil things that these people do to each other. It's all been done before. It's just that, I'm bringing bits and pieces of it into this story. And that's what's scary about some of these fiction books is pretty much everything you read, unless it's just way out there, just sci-fi and stuff like that. But the things people do to each other, it's all been done before. And so it's not like she's a twisted person or you're a twisted person or some of the things that I write are twisted things. It's all been done to animals. It's been done to humans. And, so.
Yeah.
It just catches in our brain, I think.
It does. It does. I did an interview years ago, and the lady asked me, she said, where does all this dark and twisted stuff come from? She said, it's got to be, just terrible living with that stuff inside of you. I said, everybody's got it. Everybody's got the same thing inside them. I just found a way to let mine out and play every once in a while.
Yeah.
What's crazy is you can take Milne or Fleming, who wrote great stuff like Winnie the Pooh or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or Stephen King, who wrote Desperation and the Regulators. It's the only 2 books in my life that's ever bothered me. I mean, they really got under my skin.
Yeah.
Or my books, or Barnes and Noble's turned down, stops their submission process at 100,000 every year at what they're going to put on their shelves. So, there's twice that many guys out there writing a book.
Oh, yeah.
And every one of these ideas, every one of these stories, every poem, every whatever, has all been done with the same 26 letters. They're just rearranged differently. And that blows my mind when I think about that.
That is so profound, and it's true.
I've written 23 books, somewhere around 1.4, 1.5 million words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Total.
Yeah. And
I'm using the same 26 letters that Stephen King does, or that Homer did when he wrote the Odyssey.
Yeah.
And we're all just changing them around a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just some are better at it than others.
Some are, but I think everyone has a story in them. And people who send us emails to narrate on my podcast, I mention a lot that I have a woman that helps clean those stories up a little bit so I can read them. And it's more of a time thing for me. I like editing them. I like correcting them and because they're great stories. I can tell what's going on, but I can't share it that way. I can't. Matter of fact, I just did one before we got on. It's a little short story about a woman who saw some creatures fly out of a tree. She claims it's true, and and I thought, this is too good of a story to read it this way, and I've got to take this. And sometimes you can break sentences up. You can, instead of saying it in a full paragraph sentence, you can break that paragraph down into 5 sentences, and it has so much more impact.
Oh, yeah.
When the reader reads it, or the narrator, repeats the words and puts a little emotion in it. And even with the 26 letters, you're putting words and sentences and phrases and dialogue together, and there's a way to, and I'm not the master, I'm not even good at it, but I've read enough to where I know there's a way to arrange those words. And to, something I notice about you don't use commas a lot, and a lot of times it makes me reread your sentences. They all make sense, but it's the way you put did you ever think there would be somebody out here really analyzing the way you write like this?
Just the woman that used to edit my books. I used to get a lot of feedback from her.
But there are a lot of places where I would think, and I stop and think, should there be a comma there? And I'll read it and I'll go, no, it's good the way it is. It's good the way it is. Commas are most times optional unless there's a specific rule you hit where you have to use one. Colons and semicolons and what do you call the ...
I don't know, but I use that fairly often.
You do. And I saw it, and I thought, that's perfect right here.
Yeah, I want you to know that the character is stuttering on what he's saying because he's thinking.
He's pausing just for a minute.
Next.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we may be getting into subjects that are boring the audience. I don't know. But you and I could probably sit together drinking beer and talk about this for hours, And
we could. I would love to do this over a cheeseburger one day.
Oh, that'd be great. Well, we're at an hour and 15 minutes, and I'll let the audience know that below in the description on YouTube and on the podcast, there will be links to Jeff Crawford's author page on Amazon. He is, do you mind me talking about Raventail for a minute? Raventail is one of his publishers, if not his publisher now. They're a publishing house, and I've gone to their website a couple of times, and you can find all of Jeff's books there published by them there, and a ton of other books, a ton of other writers who have books published with series, standalone books. I'm so glad that I kind of found them through you, because that's another source of great reading for me. And so I'll say this. Thank you for joining me. I know you're busy, and this is Labor Day. We're doing this on Labor Day. And I appreciate you so much, and I'm glad we've kind of become virtual friends. We haven't met yet, but, I would love to continue a conversation about, I'd like to have somebody I can text and say, hey, I'm stuck here. This is what I'm trying to do. What do you think? And it would just be great to have, like a girlfriend to kind of bounce things off of, so to speak, in so many words. And
hey, well, you've got my phone number and you've got my email, man. I'm always going to pick up the phone.
Well, I sure appreciate it. Well, I'm going to drop you from the screen and do an extra, and then we'll talk right after that. So just stay with me. But Jeff, thank you. Any final words or
I have had a blast, Cam, and I don't remember a time when I've had so much fun just sitting and talking writing.
That's awesome. Oh, that's awesome. Well, you're talking to a total idealistic kind of a kid. I'm 60 years old. I just turned 60 years old a couple of weeks ago. And I still, with all this stuff and reading these books and thinking about, finally at this age, I want to write some stories. And I'm just like a kid in a candy store. I just love all this stuff. So all that said, thank you very much for spending your time with us, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Hang tight. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks, Jeff, for being so gracious to come on and share your thoughts and ideas and listen to me blabber about stuff I know nothing about. But it's just really fun to talk to other people who are interesting. And I hope that you all have found another writer that you can follow. Again, his link will be in the description of this video. Jeff Crawford, JEFFCRAWFORD. Just do a search on Amazon right now and you can find him, or go to the description below and click the link. And I'll also put a link to his podcast on YouTube. And if you're on the podcast network, just do a search for And the Plot Thickens, and that is his podcast. And he talks to all other type authors as well. So thank you all for spending an hour and 18 minutes with us, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you.